Hello my dear brothers and sisters in Christ. This is Shiny with Jesus Bytes, and welcome back on a journey of exploring the Bible together. We will continue with the book of 1 Kings, covering chapters 4 through 7 today. Solomon's Officials, Chapter 4. King Solomon ruled over Israel, and these were his officials: Azariah, son of Zadok, priest; Elihoreph and Ahijah, the sons of Shisha, secretaries; Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, historian; Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, in charge of the army; Zadok and Abiathar, priests; Azariah, son of Nathan, in charge of the deputies; Zabud, son of Nathan, a priest and an advisor to the king; Ahishar, in charge of the palace; and Adoniram, son of Abda, in charge of forced labor. Solomon had 12 deputies for all Israel. They provided food for the king and his household. Each one made provision for 1 month out of the year. These were their names: Ben-Hur, in the hill country of Ephraim; Ben-Deker, in Makaz; Shalbim, Bet-Shemesh, and Elon Bet-Hanan; Ben-Hesed, in Aruboth. He had Succoth and the whole land of Hepher; Ben-Abinadab, in all Naphathor. Taphath, daughter of Solomon, was his wife; Bana, son of Ahilud, in Tanakh; Megiddo, and all Beth-Shean, which is beside Zarethan, below Jezreel; from Beth-Shean to Abel-Meholah, as far as the other side of Jokmeam; Ben-Geber, in Ramoth-Gilead. He had the villages of Zer, son of Manasseh, which are in Gilead; and he had the region of Argob, which is in Bashan, 60 great cities with walls and bronze bars; Ahinadab, son of Iddo, in Mahanaim; Ahimaaz, in Naphtali. He also had married a daughter of Solomon, Bashmath; Bana, son of Hushai, in Asher and Bealoth; Jehoshaphat, son of Haroah, in Ishkar; Shimei, son of Elah, in Benjamin; Geber, son of Uri, in the land of Gilead, the country of Shihon, king of the Amorites, and of Og, king of Bashan. There was 1 deputy in the land of Judah. Solomon's provisions. Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand by the sea. They were eating, drinking, and rejoicing. Solomon ruled over all of the kingdoms from the Euphrates River to the land of the Philistines, and as far as the border of Egypt. They offered tribute and served Solomon all the days of his life. Solomon's provisions for 1 day were 150 bushels of fine flour and 300 bushels of meal, 10 fattened oxen, 20 range oxen, and 100 sheep, besides deer, gazelles, roebucks, and pen-fed poultry. For he had dominion over everything west of the Euphrates, from Tipsha to Gaza, and over all the kings west of the Euphrates. He had peace on all his surrounding borders. Throughout Solomon's reign, Judah and Israel lived in safety from Dan to Beersheba, each man under his own vine and his own fig tree. Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. Each of those deputies for a month in turn provided food for King Solomon and for everyone who came to King Solomon's table. They neglected nothing. Each man brought the barley and the straw for the chariot teams and the other horses to the required place according to his assignment. Solomon's wisdom and literary gifts. God gave Solomon wisdom, very great insight, and understanding, as vast as the sand on the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the people of the East, greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than anyone, wiser than Ethan, the Ezrahite, and Heman, Calcol, and Darda, sons of Mahol. His reputation extended to all the surrounding nations. Solomon composed 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. He described trees from the cedar in Lebanon to the hyssop growing out of the wall. He also taught about animals, birds, reptiles, and fish. People came from everywhere, sent by every king on earth who had heard of his wisdom, to listen to Solomon's wisdom. Hiram's Building Materials, Chapter 5. Hiram, king of Tyre, sent his servants to Solomon when he heard that he had been anointed king in his father's palace. For Hiram had always been friends with David. Solomon sent this message to Hiram: "You know my father David was not able to build a temple for the name of the Lord his God. This was because of the warfare all around him, until the Lord put his enemies under his feet. The Lord my God has now given me rest all around. There is no enemies or crisis. So I plan to build a temple for the name of the Lord my God, according to what the Lord promised my father David. I will put your son on your throne in your place, and he will build a temple for my name. Therefore, command that cedars from Lebanon be cut down for me. My servants will be with your servants, and I will pay your servants wages according to whatever you say. For you know that not a man among us knows how to cut timber like the Sidonians." When Hiram heard Solomon's words, he greatly rejoiced and said, "May the Lord be praised today. He has given David a wise son to be over this great people." Then Hiram sent a reply to Solomon saying, "I have heard your message. I will do everything you want regarding the cedar and cypress timber. My servants will bring the logs down from the Lebanon to the sea, and I will make them into rafts to go by sea to the place you indicate. I will break them apart there, and you can take them away. You then can meet my needs by providing my household with food." So Hiram provided Solomon with all the cedar and cypress timber he wanted, and Solomon provided Hiram with 100,000 bushels of wheat as food for his household and 110,000 gallons of beaten oil. Solomon did this for Hiram year after year. The Lord gave Solomon wisdom, as he promised him. There was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty. Solomon's workforce. Then King Solomon drafted forced laborers from all Israel. The labor force numbered 30,000 men. He sent 10,000 to Lebanon each month in shifts. 1 month they were in Lebanon. 2 months they were at home. Adoniram was in charge of the forced labor. Solomon had 70,000 porters and 80,000 stone cutters in the mountains, not including his 3,300 deputies in charge of the work. They ruled over the people during the work. The king commanded them to quarry large, costly stones to lay the foundation of the temple with dressed stones. So Solomon's builders and Hiram's builders, along with the Gebalites, quarried the stone and prepared the timber and stone for the temple's construction. Building the Temple, Chapter 6. Solomon began to build the temple for the Lord in the 480th year after the Israelites came out from the land of Egypt. In the 4th year of his reign over Israel, in the 2nd month, in the month of Ziv, the temple that King Solomon built for the Lord was 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 45 feet high. The portico in front of the temple sanctuary was 30 feet long, extending across the temple's width, and 15 feet deep in front of the temple. He also made windows with beveled frames for the temple. He then built a chambered structure along the temple wall, encircling the walls of the temple, that is the sanctuary and the inner sanctuary. And he made side chambers all around. The lowest chamber was 7.5 feet wide, the middle was 9 feet wide, and the third was 10.5 feet wide. He also provided offset ledges for the temple all around the outside, so that nothing would be inserted into the temple walls. The temple's construction used finished stones cut at the quarry, so that no hammer, chisel, or any iron tool was heard in the temple while it was being built. The door for the lowest side chamber was on the right side of the temple. They went up a stairway to the middle chamber, and from the middle to the third. When he finished building the temple, he paneled it with boards and planks of cedar. He built the chambers along the entire temple, joined to the temple with cedar beams. Each story was 7.5 feet high. The word of the Lord came to Solomon. As for this temple you are building, if you walk in my statutes, execute my ordinances, and keep all my commandments by walking in them, I will fulfill my promise to you, which I made to your father David. I will live among the Israelites and not abandon my people Israel. When Solomon finished building the temple, he paneled the interior temple walls with cedar boards. From the temple floor to the surface of the ceiling, he overlaid the interior with wood. He also overlaid the floor with cypress boards. Then he lined 30 feet of the rear of the temple with cedar boards from the floor to the surface of the ceiling, and he built the interior as an inner sanctuary, the most holy place. The temple, that is, the sanctuary in the front of the most holy place. was 60 feet long. The cedar paneling inside the temple was carved with ornamental gourds and flower blossoms. Everything was cedar. Not a stone could be seen. He prepared the inner sanctuary inside the temple to put the Ark of the Lord's covenant there. The interior of the sanctuary was 30 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 30 feet high. He overlaid it with pure gold. He also overlaid the cedar altar. Next, Solomon overlaid the interior of the temple with pure gold, and he hung gold chains across the front of the inner sanctuary and overlaid it with gold. So he added the gold overlay to the entire temple until everything was completely finished, including the entire altar that belongs in the inner sanctuary. In the inner sanctuary, he made 2 cherubim, 15 feet high, out of olive wood. One wing of the first cherub was 7.5 feet long, and the other wing was 7.5 feet long. The wingspan was 15 feet from tip to tip. The second cherub also was 15 feet. Both cherubim had the same size and shape. The first cherub's height was 15 feet, and so was the second cherub's. Then he put the cherubim inside the inner temple. Since their wings were spread out, the first one's wing touched one wall, while the second cherub's wing touched the other. And in the middle of the temple, their wings were touching wing to wing. He also overlaid the cherubim with gold. He carved all the surrounding temple walls with carved engravings, cherubim, palm trees, and flower blossoms in both the inner and the outer sanctuaries. He overlaid the temple floor with gold in both the inner and the outer sanctuaries. For the entrance of the inner sanctuary, he made olive wood doors. The pillars of the doorposts were 5-sided. The 2 doors were made of olive wood. He carved cherubim, palm trees, and flower blossoms on them and overlaid them with gold, hammering gold over the cherubim and palm trees. In the same way, he made 4-sided olive wood doorposts for the sanctuary entrance. The 2 doors were made of cypress wood. The first door had 2 folding sides, and the second door had 2 folding panels. He carved cherubim, palm trees, and flower blossoms on them and overlaid them with gold applied evenly over the carving. He built the inner courtyard with 3 rows of dressed stone and a row of trim cedar beams. The foundation of the Lord's temple was laid in Solomon's 4th year in the month of Ziv. In his 11th year in the 8th month, in the month of Bul, the temple was completed in every detail and according to every specification. So he built it in 7 years. Solomon's Palace Complex. Chapter 7. Solomon completed his entire palace complex after 13 years of construction. He built the house of the forest of Lebanon. It was 150 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high on 4 rows of cedar pillars, with cedar beams on top of the pillars. It was paneled above with cedar at the top of the chambers that rested on 45 pillars, 15 per row. There was 3 rows of window frames facing each other in 3 tiers. All the doors and doorposts had rectangular frames, the openings facing each other in 3 tiers. He made the whole of pillars 75 feet long and 45 feet wide. A portico was in front of the pillars, and a canopy with pillars were in front of them. He made the hall of the throne where he would judge, the hall of judgment. It was paneled with cedar from floor to the rafters, Solomon's own palace where he would live. In the other courtyard behind the hall was a similar construction, and he made a house like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, his wife. All of these buildings were of costly stones, cut to size and sawed with saws on the inner and the outer surfaces, from foundation to coping and from the outside to the great courtyard. The foundation was made of large costly stones, 12 feet and 15 feet long. Above were also costly stones cut to size, as well as cedar wood. Around the great courtyard, as well as the inner courtyard of the Lord's temple and the portico of the temple, were 3 rows of dressed stone and a row of trimmed cedar beams. King Solomon had Hiram brought from Tyre. He was a widow's son and from the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, a bronze craftsman. Hiram had great skill, understanding, and knowledge to do every kind of bronze work. So he came to King Solomon and carried out all his work. The bronze pillars. He cast 2 hollow bronze pillars, each 27 feet high and 18 feet in circumference. He also made 2 capitals of cast bronze to set on top of the pillars. 7.5 feet was the height of the first capital, and 7.5 feet was also the height of the second capital. The capitals on top of the pillars had gratings of latticework, reeds made of chainwork, 7 for the first capital and 7 for the second. He made the pillars with 2 encircling rows of pomegranates on the one grating to cover the capital on top. He did the same for the second capital. And the capitals on top of the pillars in the portico were shaped like lilies, 6 feet high. The capitals on the 2 pillars were also immediately above the rounded surface next to the grating. And 200 pomegranates were in rows encircling each capital. He set up the pillars at the portico of the sanctuary. He set up the right pillar and named it Jachin. Then he set up the left pillar and named it Boaz. The tops of the pillars were shaped like lilies. Then the work of the pillars was completed. The reservoir. He made the cast metal reservoir, 15 feet from brim to brim, perfectly round. It was 7.5 feet high and 45 feet in circumference. Ornamental gourds encircled it below the brim, 10 every half yard, completely encircling the reservoir. The gourds were cast in 2 rows when the reservoir was cast. It stood on 12 oxen, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. The reservoir was on top of them, and all their hind quarters were toward the center. The reservoir was 3 inches thick, and its rim was fashioned like the brim of a cup or of a lily blossom. It held 11,000 gallons. The bronze water carts. Then he made 10 bronze water carts. Each water cart was 6 feet long, 6 feet wide, and 4.5 feet high. This was the design of the carts. They had frames. The frames were between the cross pieces, and on the frames between the cross pieces were lions, oxen, and cherubim. On the cross pieces there was a pedestal above, and below the lions and oxen were wreaths of hanging work. Each cart had 4 bronze wheels with bronze axles. Underneath the 4 corners of the basin were cast supports, each next to a wreath. And the water carts opening inside the crown on top was 18 inches wide. The opening was round, made as a pedestal 27 inches wide. On it were carvings, but their frames were square, not round. There were 4 wheels under the frames, and the wheel axles were part of the water cart. Each wheel was 27 inches tall. The wheel's design was similar to that of the chariot wheels. The axles, rims, spokes, and hubs were all of cast metal. 4 supports were at the 4 corners of each water cart. Each support was 1 piece with a water cart. At the top of the cart was a band 9 inches high encircling it. Also at the top of the cart, its braces and its frames were 1 piece with it. He engraved cherubim, lions, and palm trees on the plates of its braces and on its frames, wherever each had space, with encircling wreaths. In this way he made the 10 water carts using the same casting, dimensions, and shape for all of them. Bronze, basins, and other utensils. Then he made 10 bronze basins, each basin holding 220 gallons, and each was 6 feet wide, 1 basin for each of the 10 water carts. He set 5 water carts on the right side of the temple and 5 on the left side. He put the reservoir near the right side of the temple toward the southeast. Then Hiram made the basins, the showels, and the sprinkling basins. Completion of the bronze works. So Hiram finished all the work that he was doing for King Solomon on the Lord's temple. 2 pillars, bowls for the capitals that were on the top of the pillars, the 2 gratings for the covering, both bowls of the capitals that were on top of the pillars, the 400 pomegranates for the 2 gratings, 2 rows of pomegranates for each grating covering both capitals bowls on the top of the pillars, the 10 water carts, the 10 basins on the water carts, the reservoir, the 12 oxen underneath the reservoir, and the posts, the showels, the sprinkling basins, all the utensils that Hiram made for King Solomon at the Lord's temple were made of burnished bronze. The king had them cast in clay molds in the Jordan Valley between Succoth and Zarethan. Solomon left all the utensils unweighed because there were so many. The weight of the bronze was not determined. Completion of the gold furnishings. Solomon also made all the equipment in the Lord's temple, the gold altar, the gold table that the bread of the presence was placed on, the pure gold lampstands in front of the inner sanctuary, 5 on the right and 5 on the left, the gold flowers, lamps, and tongs, the pure gold ceremonial bowls, wick trimmers, sprinkling basins, ladles, and fire pans, and the gold hinges for the doors of the inner temple, that is the most holy place, and for the doors of the temple sanctuary. So all the work King Solomon did in the Lord's temple was completed. Then Solomon brought in the consecrated things of his father David, the silver, the gold, and the utensils, and put them in the treasuries of the Lord's temple. The word of the Lord. Have a blessed day. Ciao.